All right, I'm going to start us with the sponsors, and then we'll go on with today's text. Okay. Learning sponsors, Paula and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael, in memory of Malcolm Mann, and members of her family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Shall share her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. Marsha Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon. Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel Bas Yaakov. Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Siddell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gitler, Ava Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Charna Bas Yeshaya. Friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. We have a month of learning by Haran and Mel Haller in memory of her father, Yosef Eliezer ben Tzvi Hirsch, by P.B. Pizer, in memory of her father, Yitzchadov ben Shmuel, by Mordechai and Miriam Burr, in memory of his mother, Manya Bas Harav Shimon Halevi, by Cheryl Schur, in honor of those who joined her first series of epistemology of Tefillah classes. A week of learning is sponsored by Michael and Judy Poretsky in memory of his mother Rachel Bas Avram, and by Jack Gilman in memory of his brother Zev Yosef ben Yitzchak, by Sharon and Michael Glass in memory of her mother Chaya Bas Avram Baruch, by Susan and Ron Podolsky in memory of her mother Chaya Bas Avram Dov. We also have coming up today, I think that's actually it. Today's being the 11th, so that's it. May the Shema have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia Vet the Yeshiva Shema Tzliya, and the whole B'nai Yisrael a good Geben Shtiar.
Amen.
Okay. As I mentioned to Erwin this morning, with the new time on Thursday morning for the davening at 8 o'clock, we'll just have to adjust the time for the morning for the daf. I'll look ahead to see what it is and try to let everybody know within the next day or two.
What's changing in the
on Thursday morning for Yom Ha'atzmaut, there'll be only one davening at 8 o'clock.
Right.
Okay.
Are you starting later on Rosh Chodesh?
That's a good question. Like we usually do on Rosh Chodesh, we figure at
Today's Rosh Chodesh.
What?
Today's
No, Rosh Chodesh is coming up, right?
The Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday. Usually we started 15 minutes later, which gives us actually more time because I leave early, but by the time I get through the sponsors, that's another 5 minutes or so. So if we start at if we call it for quarter of, and then I need the sponsors, that will give us that time. Okay. All right. Today we're going to pick up on Kaf Amud Beis. I'd like us to start 3 lines up from the bottom. Okay. Seems an appropriate place. Okay. Gemara was already discussing for us the practices of the chavitin, what happens with the Kohen Gadol, okay? And the fact that there are certain items associated with bringing that chavitin, not just the grain, but oil and things like that, right? He brings one in the morning, okay, and one in the evening, right? And that is the issue. First, it discussed how it was to be made, now how much, and what happens with the situation. Namely, that if you had a Kohen who died during the day, what happens later, excuse me, to the second chavitin? Sorry, is it brought as again based on what the deceased Kohen Gadol was? Does the new Kohen Gadol have to bring just a half, or does he bring a whole, or things like that? Okay. So coming back now on Kaf Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, citing our Mishnah, Kohen Gadol Shemet v'chulei, Rebbe Ba Bar Memo Bai. So the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Ba Bar Memo had a dilemma about the following. Mechlafa shitate de Rabbi Shimon, that the response that Rabbi Shimon gave previously as to how to behave differs in 2 different places. Okay, Tman Amar Mishal Yoshim. There, he says in another example, okay, what did he say? That it came from the mincha was provided by the heirs of the Kohen Gadol. Vahacha, here, okay, it seems that he's implying that it's brought from the biblical reason, from the communal money, the treasury. So we now follow over to today's daf. Amar Rabbi Chia Bar Ba. He says, "V'lo ye'otu miksheh." Wasn't it appropriate? How well that he asked, challenged, raised this issue? At Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha. So Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha came, and he said the following: Rabbi Abahu b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, citing Rabbi Abahu in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Var Torah hu shetehei ba min hatzibur, that according to the Torah rule, it should come from the community, right? And now we have a little parenthesis there, okay? But let's go on past the parenthesis. Hayiti omer yigbula min hayorshin. Here we would have said, in other words, logic perhaps would have given us the idea that it should come from the heirs of the Kohen Gadol. Kivan dechazi de pashe be. Okay, again, questionable language, right? But right, what happens? Hitkinu shetehei ba'a mitrumat halishka. But while biblically it could have been expected to come from the heirs, the rabbis made a decree, and their decree was that it would be collected from the community, from the treasury chamber. Now, Gemara wants to continue this discussion in a slightly different venue. Rabbi Yossi Amar, he says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and he made the following question: Mahu shlema b'shacharit u'shlema bein ha'arbayim? Do we say then, when this new Kohen takes office, that he has to bring, okay, the fact that in the morning was a full offering, okay, and then again in the evening is another full offering, okay? a whole one in the morning, a whole one in the afternoon. Okay, and right, because usually the Kohen Gadol brought a whole one in the morning, but split it between the morning and the afternoon. O shlema b'shachrit ubutela ben ha'arbayim. Or is it such that since the morning Kohen on duty or in office brought a whole one in the morning, it's nullified or it's suspended in the afternoon. Okay, so the Gemara tells us, "Kad tehei pshitole." So, since we find an answer to this, dichtiv, why? Because it seems to say, minchat tamid, that the mincha must be continuous, ongoing. Okay, if that's the case, it still has to be brought, but we don't know how much. So therefore, the Gemara continues this line of inquiry. Shloshet lugin mahen. What about the fact that this chavitin is going to include 3 logan of oil? Do we say, as the now Gemara tells us, Shloshet lugin shachrit u'shloshet lugin ben ha'arbayim, that when we said this 3 lugin of oil, it's 3 in the morning and 3 also in the afternoon, because it's a new Kohen Gadol starting his office. O lugu mechza shachrit, lugu mechza arbayim. Or do we say no, okay, that it's sort of carried over and that it was 1.5 to go along with the chavitin in the morning, and the new Kohen, or the new one in office in the afternoon, only has to bring 1.5 as well. Amar Rabbi Chizkiah, of Hada. Okay, so in other words, afilu here, that we would say in the Bavli, even here too, tzrichale. All right, do we need to say the following? Shnei kumtzin. Do we say that we're talking about 2 fistfuls or palmfuls? Mahem, what's their status? Shnei kumtzin b'shachrit u'shnei kumtzin ben ha'arbayim. Do we say here too that since the chavitin requires 2 fists or handfuls, is it 2 in the morning, and then the new Kohen in office has to bring also 2 in the afternoon? Oh, perhaps kometz echad b'shachrit v'kometz echad ben ha'arbayim. Okay, or 1 fist or handful in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. What's the status? So the Gemara tells us, Amar Rabbi Yosef, says Rabbi Yosef, klum lamdu l'kometz lo minchat chait, or chote. Did not we learn the whole requirement of the kometz from the issue of the sinner's mincha? Namely, malahalan shnei kumtzin, avkan shnei kumtzin. Since we saw that there are 2 kumtzin, okay, right? Do we see that there? Is that what the text tells us? Okay, or not? So here too, then we would need 2. Matman tzrichale, avhacha tzrichale. Seems to be additional language. Just as there's a question, so here too seems to be a question. Amar Rabbi Chizkiah, again stating, klum lamdu shloshet lugin lo tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. So didn't we also not learn that this amount of oil of 3 lugin, didn't we learn that also from a previous example? Okay, from the afternoon tamid, malahalan shloshet lugin, avkan shloshet lugin. So there it says 3 lugin. So here 2, doesn't it also imply 3 lugin? Umat man tzrichale, Afkan Srichale. And the same way there was doubt, question, inquiry. So here too, we also have some doubt and question, inquiry. Okay, so the implication is, again, we see these questions raised. Right? Do we get an answer? Look at the long note on 21A2, note 18. You can see that Artsville has a long comment. Okay. And so that attempts to deal with the various examples that we've raised, right? But if you look at the very end, okay, it seems to imply, that still there was no clear decision, okay? Now, the next piece cites again from our Mishnah. Shelo yeh v'chulei. Okay. So again, we're still dealing with this issues. Rabbi Shimon ben Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yochanan says as follows, right? Namely, what about our other topic? I'm sorry. Namely, the afar of the para aduma. So he says, Rabbi Shimon bar Nachman, b'shem Rabbi Yonatan, badin haya sheyima'alu ba b'hein gazru shelo. He says, logically, the Torah would seem to imply, okay, that one should be subject to me'ila in regards, namely, misuse of the ash of the para aduma. But the rabbis made a decree that they were not subject to it, to misuse, to me'ila, right? Shelo yima'aluba. Vahatani chatat. But elsewhere we learn, okay, that the Torah compares the para aduma to a chatas, which would seem to imply, again, milamed shema'alim ba. That would seem to imply, again, that there is possible misuse of it. So the Gemara answers, ba mo'alim. You misuse of the object itself does apply. Ve'ein mo'alim ba'afara. But we don't have a situation where its ashes are subject to misuse, to me'ila. Now, Amar Rabbi Abahu. This is Rabbi Abahu trying to, I believe, clarify the situation. Barishona hayu mishtak shakin ba. Originally, he says, Rabbi Abahu, people used to use this ash to clean themselves. V'notnino ta'al gav makoteim. And they would even put this ash on their wounds, thinking that it had medicinal value. V'gazru sheyima aluba. And the rabbis made a decree that such was considered misuse of the ash of para aduma. Kevan shenigdaru, since the people restrained themselves, gazru shelo yima'aluba. They made another decree that they do not misuse and are not subject to me'ila in that situation. Okay. New topic. V'al hakinin kuli. Okay, what about the issue of these pairs of animals, pairs of birds, right? What happened? The Gemara tells us there, raised the question, Ha'isha hazot v'mehi mitkaperet. If a woman, let's say, who gave birth is supposed to bring both a chatas and an olah, and all her money went into the olah offering chest, how does she gain any kind of atonement, was our question. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Tanai Beit Dinhu, that there's a condition that the Beis Din has established. Okay? Hamisapek et hakinin hu misapek et psulot ve'et ha'avodot. That the one who provides the woman, let's say, with her kinim, with her pairs of birds, must provide what we'll call for the moment an additional or a supplementary bird as well, because that can make up for any situations if one of the birds becomes
Short.
valid
Right,
or one of the birds gets lost.
right.
Hadranalach perek ma'ot shenimtzu. Okay. We now go to the new and final perek in Shkalim, chapter 8. Okay. This topic brings a new item. Okay. And that is the fact that I'm going to try to connect it briefly. Okay. We saw previously the discussion was money that didn't make it into the chests. Okay. Either it was lying on the floor near a chest or it was lying between two chests. So I'm going to call that for the moment lost money, because it would be lost to the Beis Mikdash, okay, for the purpose of offerings. Okay. Here, we now continue now with our discussion, okay, of the fact that since we touched somewhat on issues of Tuma and Tara, okay, are there situations where something is lost again, okay, either to the Beis Hamikdash or to people because of Tuma and Tara? Okay. So that's where we're going to pick up. Halacha Aleph Matnidin, our Mishnah, starts as follows. Kol harukin, any kind of spittle, hanimtzain b'Yerushalayim, that's found in Jerusalem, the city. In other words, not just in the temple environment, okay? In other words, the Azara, the outer courtyards, outside, but it would imply throughout the city, Tohorin, would be considered pure. Chutz mishel shuk ha'elyon, with the exception of the upper market, Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the view of Rabbi Meir, which of course is going to make us ask, why Dafka, the upper market? What's so significant about that location that any spittle found on the ground was problematic, would cause tumor? Rabbi Yossi Omer. Rabbi Yossi is going to give us a further explanation. Okay. Now, whether it could be that it clarifies Rabbi Meir, or does it disagree with Rabbi Meir? Bishar kol yomot hashana, in the normal rest of the days of the year, sheba emtza, okay, any spittle found in the middle of the roadway, tme'in, that's considered tameh. Shebet stadin, but any found along the sides of the roadway, okay, tahorin, that would be considered tahor. Ubashat haregel, but during the time of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, sheba emtza, if spittle is found in the middle of the roadway, tahorin, that's tahor. Shebet stadin, or if it's found on the outer side of the road, okay, tme'in, it's considered tameh. Why? Mepnei shehamu'atin mistalkin litzdadim, because the minority of people, okay, will tend to walk, travel, okay, along the sides. Okay, so the implication here at this point is that on the holidays, where the majority of people come to be able to go into the Beis Hamikdash, the majority of people are tahor. And therefore, anyone who's tameh, zav, zava, for example, matzora, tend to walk on the outskirts of the road. During the rest of the year, that's not necessarily the case. And the Gemara is going to tell us this in more detail shortly. Okay. Now, Kol HaKelim, continues the Mishnah, all of the utensils, Hanimtzaim B'Yerushalayim, that if you see a utensil on the ground, Derech Yerida, the Beit HaTvila, Tme'im. If it looks like it's on the pathway, I'm going to use the term, okay, or on the steps, or in the direction, but I like pathway better, as if one is directed to go to a mikvah, then we assume that that utensil, tme'im, that it's tameh. V'derech aliyah, but if we see that lost utensil lying on the ground, okay, that may have fallen out of a basket or something, but it's in the direction coming from a mikvah, tahorim. We can assume that it is tahor. Why? Shelo yiridatan aliyatan divrei Rabbi Meir. That the direction, the pathway, okay, of going down to the mikvah is not the same as the pathway, okay, coming back up from the mikvah. Koren actually had a picture, okay, then of a entrance to a mikvah in Yerushalayim, where there were two sets of steps, okay, implying, okay, and a, so to speak, a stone, can't call it separation, let's call it that for the moment, between the two sets of steps, okay? And so that would imply, okay, that people would come in and go down one way, come out the other way, okay? Now, what happens? Rabbi Yossi again. Kulan tahorin chutz min hasal v'hamagrefa v'hamaritza. So Rabbi Yossi says, disagrees again, implying that all utensils could be assumed to be tahor, with the exception of the following: a basket, a magrefa, which we're going to define as a long-handled shovel, okay, v'hamaritza, and I'm going to define hamritza as a utensil shaped like, somewhat like a pickaxe, but it's actually equivalent to what was called a dolabra, okay, which was, again, Koren had a picture, okay, where instead of what we normally think of a pickaxe as a handle and pointed at both ends, okay, this was a utensil where it was pointed at one end, but the other end came out more like a flat head kind of piece. Right? And these utensils were used particularly by grave diggers, okay, to move rocks, to move bones, things like that, okay? So that's what he seems to be implying. Okay, Hamiyuchadim likvarot, he says, that these are unique and particularly used with regards to graves. Okay. Now, finishing up the Mishnah, Sakin shinim tzeit, okay, biyudalid. Let's assume we have a knife, and that knife had been lost, but it was found on the 14th of Nisan. Can we assume something about its status? Okay. The implication is normally a owner would have been sure that that knife would have been immersed and be tahor because they want to use that knife
Zegt de Korban
for
Pesach.
their shechting of their korban pesach. And therefore the Mishnah says, shochet ba miyad, that it would be possible to use it immediately. Bishlosha asar, but if we find that knife on the 13th of Nisan, we cannot be sure, can't make the assumption that the owner would have already immersed it. Okay. Now, what happens? And therefore, in that case, shoneh umatbil. We must repeat and immerse it. That's explanation. Okay. Now, another utensil, kofitz, what we're going to call a meat cleaver. Okay, everybody knows what a meat cleaver is, I'm sure, in terms of the shape. Okay. What about that? Bazeh ubazeh shoneh umatbil. In other words, whether it was found on the 14th or the 13th, one must go back and immerse it again. Because again, no presumption of being tahor can be made under those circumstances. I won't go into the additional detail, but I will tell you that Koren had a long, long note on this particular item, because claiming, why couldn't you make that assumption about the meat cleaver, okay, if you find it on the 14th? And there's a number of issues. All I will just quickly point is, then we'll continue, is that part of it has to do with the fact that you cannot break the bones of the Korban Pesach, nor on a Korban Chagiga to be eaten with that Korban Pesach. Okay, that was one of the key issues. Okay, so therefore with that meat cleaver, one had to repeat and immerse. Now, however, the Mishnah continues, Chal Arba'ah Asar Liot B'Shabbat, if the 14th, right, comes out on Erev Shabbos, like we happen to have this year, right? Shochet ba miyad. Okay, then we can assume that the person naturally will
Hebben we het dan over?
okay, and it will be tahor. But tedvav, but if it's found on the 15th, okay, all right, what happens? Okay, if you found it on Yom Tov itself, shochet ba miyad. Okay, he also can use it immediately. Nemseit kshura l'sakin. What happens if that cleaver was connected, tied in some way to a knife? Harehi kisakin. Then it's like the status of the knife. Okay, long discussion on this as well. Okay, difference between this and a Braita. Okay, New Gemara style tells us. Okay, remember we started off our Mishnah by saying spittle in the upper marketplace cannot be assumed to be tahor. Why? Rabbi Avin b'shem Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Avin says in the name of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, katzran. Okay, two different explanations of this term. According to one, it was a Gentile laundry, and therefore there were a lot of Gentiles found in that location. According to the other, it was a Gentile fortress, and therefore a lot of Gentile soldiers were found there. In either case, because of the predominance of numbers of Gentiles found in that location, and the rabbis had made it a decree that a Gentile, was considered tameh like a zav. Therefore, any Gentiles, spittle from Gentiles would be Tameh. Amar Rabbi Chanina, telling us another story, an alternative explanation. Arudot hayu nochrin b'Yerushalayim. Okay, that namely wild donkeys used to be speared, okay, in that area in Jerusalem. Vahayu ole regalim mishtakim bedam ad arkevotehen. And when pilgrims came, they had to go through that area, and blood was up to their ankles. Uba'u lefnei chachamim v'lo amru lahen davar. But when they came to the sages and they inquired, okay, if because they were coming to the Beis Hamikdash on the holiday, if they were tameh or not, the rabbis did not prohibit them, okay? Said nothing. Now we have then the following question. What is the status of the blood of such animals, of a novela? Okay. Rabbi Simon, we skipped the parentheses. Okay. B'Shem Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi tells us as follows. Ma'aseh bepreda mishel beit Rabbi Shemeta. We have an incident where the animal, the mule, okay, of the house of Rebbe had died. V'tiharu et dameha mishum nevela. And the sages permitted its blood, okay? In other words, it declared that its blood did not render tameh from this carcass. Rabbi Eliezer Sha'il, the Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Eliezer questioned, okay, was this an issue of the blood? Was it an issue of the amount? What's the situation? And so he asks Rabbi Simon, Ad kama? How much? Okay. Velo agive. And he didn't come back and give him an answer. Sha'il Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. He went directly to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and asked him. Amarle, he told him, Ad revi'is tahor. Up till a revi'is, we would say the blood is tahor. Beyond that, yoter mikan tomei. Beyond that, it is tamei. So what happens, says the Gemara? Uba'ash, the Rebbe Lezer, the lo chazar le Rebbe Simon shmuata. That Rebbe Eliezer was either annoyed, according to one explanation, or embarrassed, according to another explanation, that Rabbi Simon did not give him an answer. Now, Rabbivi, right, or Beve, Hava Yativ Matne Hadin Uvta. Rabbivi was sitting and he was reviewing and discussing this particular incident. Amarle Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna. And Rabbi Yitzchak bar Bisna asked the same question. Ad kama? How much blood are we talking about? Amarle ad revi'it tahor. Up till a revi'is would be tahor. Yoter mikan tamei. More than that, it would be tamei. What happens, says the Gemara? Uba'at be. And then, okay, after he gave him an answer, he gave him a shav, a kick. Okay. So the Gemara tells us, Amale Reb Zrika, begin da hava she'ilach ad ba'it be. Because he asks you a shaila, you give him a shtach, you give him a kick, a push, or whatever. You don't pay attention to him. Amale, he responded, begin de lo havid da'ate be. He said, did it only because I could not give him my mind wasn't on what he was asking. I couldn't give him an answer. The Amar Rabbi Chanan, because as Rabbi Chanan says, the following, citing a pasuk, V'hayu chayecha tuli'im lach mineged, if your life, okay, is dependent, okay, on certain things, all right? Hangs in the balance, so to speak. Zeh shehu lokeach lo chitin l'shana. That's the person who is, life depends on what he earns, okay, in the course of a year. Next, the verse continues. Upacharata laila v'yomam. And you'll fear day and night. You'll be frightened on night and day. Zeh shehu lokeach min ha-sidki. That's the person whose livelihood, whose welfare depends on what he can arrange with the merchant or with the storekeeper. Further in the pasuk, v'lo ta'amin b'chayecha. Okay, again, you will not be sure of your life. Zeh shehu lokeach min hapaltor. That's the person who must depend on the baker. In other words, he has to almost beg daily to get enough to survive. Va'ana samich al paltira. And my life, he says, I'm basically so requiring to focus on my daily bread, that therefore I could not focus on give him a proper answer. My kadun. So what then is the law? He'id Rabbi Yeshua ben Petora. He tells us, al dam nevelot shahu tahor, that the blood of a carcass is tahor. Mahu tahor? Tahor mila hachshir. It is tahor from preparing as a liquid. The blood is tahor from preparing other things to become tameh. Halitmot metame. But it itself, the blood, does render things tameh. Tman tanina. But elsewhere we're taught as follows, says the Gemara. Right? Dam hasheretz metame kivsaro. That the blood of a sheretz, of a creeping a creature, is similar to its flesh. Metame ve'ein machshir. It renders something tameh, but it doesn't make it susceptible. Okay, prepares it for tumah. Ve'ein lanu kiyotzebo, and there is nothing similar else like it. The Gemara continues. Ve'ein lanu kiyotzebo kishiur tumato. We say that there's nothing similar to it in terms of the fact of the measurement that we use to render, to dequalify it as tameh. Aval damo metameh kibsaro. But its blood does convey tumah like its flesh. Amar Rabbi Yossi. And Rabbi Yossi continues explaining, Pligi bat trin emoraim, that there's an argument between two emoraim on this issue. Chad amar tameh, one says it's tameh, v'chad amar tahor. The other says it's tahor. Man da amar tameh ki Rabbi Yehuda. The one who says it's tameh holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Uman da amar tahor ki Rabbi Yeshua ben Petora. Holds like Rabbi Yeshua ben Petora. Amar le now he says, Rav Avduma, the min nechuta. Rav Avduma, from those who descend. Okay? We need to understand this term as the fact that when it was those scholars who would travel back and forth from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Okay? And Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. So from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel would be going down, and the commentary in Koren suggests that Rav Avduma and Rav Dimi, who we often found in the Bavli, were one and the same person. Okay? V'yeut, and well said, the Rabbi Yehuda, Moraina de Ben Nesiya Hava. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda was the halachic expert, the teacher, okay? He was the mashgiach whatever term we want to use, in the house of the Nasi, of Rebbe. Now, coming to our clarification further from our Mishnah, Kol Harokin, what about all this spittle? Lo chen amar Rebbe Abahu. Was it not such that Rebbe Abahu had said, B'Shem Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, Lo gozru al harukin shebYerushalayim ha. Didn't they not make a decree in regards to spittle in Jerusalem? Itmar aleh, it was said about it, Rabbi Abban b'Shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that Rabbi Abban said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Katzran shel machrim hayasham, that there was a laundry or a fort of Gentiles there. B'shayimot hashana, okay, what happens? We said there was this difference of opinion. What was it based on? Gemara is going to clarify. Rest of the year, right? Days of the year. Hatmein mahalchin shibolet. The Tameh people would walk in the middle of the road. V'hatahorin mahalchin min hatzad. And those people who wanted to guarantee, I'm going to say, their purity would walk on the sides of the road. V'hatahorin mahalchin stam. And the pure people would walk in general. V'hatmein omrim lahen parushu. And the people who were tameh would say to them, keep separate. B'shat haregel. But in the time of the holidays, 3 pilgrimage holidays, hatahorin mahalchin shibolet. The tahor people would walk in the middle of the roadway. V'hatmein mahalchin min hatzad. And those who were literally impure would walk along the edges of the road. Hatmein mahalchin stam. Those that were tameh would walk in general. V'hatahorin omrin lahen paroshu. And those who were pure would tell the tameh people, keep separate, stay away. New piece from our Mishnah. Kol hakelim hanimtzaim. All those lost utensils, right? If they were found. Lo chen amar Rabbi Abahu, b'Shem Rabbi Yochanan. Was it not such that Rabbi Abahu had said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo gazru al hakelim shebYerushalayim, that the rabbis did not make a decree regarding utensils in Jerusalem. Mekevan shenimtza'u derech yerida lebeit hatfilah, since if it were found on the pathway going down to the mikveh, na'asu hochiach. That seems to be as if it was proof. Abba Shaul haya korei otan sipori. However, since we saw there was a difference of opinion, and we listed certain utensils, okay, especially what we called the one that was like the pickaxe, right? We said, right, that particular utensil, right? Okay. What did he call it? He called it like a fingernail. Man damar tziporon. Why did he call it like a fingernail? Right? Shahaya domeh letzipor, because it was shaped flat at one end like a fingernail. Man damar meritza, one who called it the meritza, right? Shemeritza et ha'evan lebeit hakvarot, because it helped claw away, so to speak, rocks in the cemetery. Kofitz, in regard to the cleaver, Tane, there's a Braita, however, that taught Hasakin Kshurala, if there is a knife connected to it, Harezo Kimota, that the knife is like the cleaver, which is different from what our Mishnah taught, that the cleaver would be like the knife. Okay, Halacha, that new Mishnah. Okay, a brand new subject, a whole different item. The parochet, okay, which remember is a curtain, okay, in the Beis Hamikdash, and we're assuming we're going to talk about the parochet that separated between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kadosh. Okay? All right. Remember, there were two curtains there, actually. Parochet shenitmet bevlad hatuma. If the parochet there became impure as a result of a second degree tuma, okay? Second source of tuma. Matbilin otam bifnim. We immerse it in a mikveh that is on the temple precinct, in the temple grounds, right? Umachnisin otamiyad. And if we had to take it outside, then we can bring it back in and put it back up immediately. V'shenitmeit ba'av hatuma. But if for some reason the parochet had become tomei from a first level tuma, matbilin ota bachutz, okay, v'shotchin ota b'chel. We would immerse it in a mikvah outside of the temple environs, v'shotchin, and we would spread it on the area of the chel, mipnei shahayat tzricha ha'erev shemesh. Why? Because it needs for the sun to set on it. In other words, it's not tahor
Until after the
till nightfall. Right. Im hayta chadasha, if it were a new parochet, shotchin ota al gag ha'itztaba. If that's the case, that they would spread it out and put it on the roof of the itztaba. The itztaba was the area where there was a columns and a covering, and there were benches underneath it. And they would put it there so the sun could dry it. Kadei sheyireh ha'am et malachta shehina'eh. So that the population, since that was up high, people could actually see the decoration of the parochet. Okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, he says, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Haskan. He said in the name of Rabbi Shimon, the Skan, son of the Skan, right? Parochet overet tefech al shivim ushtayim nimim ne'ereged. That the parochet had been, its thickness was a handbreadth. Why? Because it was 72 threads or strands of yarn by which it was made. Al kol nima v'nima kaf daled chutin. For each strand, it was 24 threads. Arka, its length, arba'im amma, was 40 amma. Urchava, its width was 20 amma. Ushmonim shtayim ribo hayta ne'esed. And from 80, right, to 10,000s of gold coins was its either value or what, that's where the gold threads, how the gold threads were made. Ushtayim osim b'chol shana. And they would make 2 new parochets each year. V'shalosh me'ot kohanim matbilin ota. And it could take 300 kohanim to immerse it in the mikveh. Gemara. Okay. Ela amar chut echad. Had they said chut, it would have been 1. Kaful would have been l'shnayim, 2 threads. Shazur would have meant 3 threads. Mashzar, intertwined, l'shisha, that would have meant 6 threads. Arba'a mikan, there were 4 of those, hence esrim va'arba'a, 24. Tani. And another Braita, however, suggests shloshim u'shtayim, that there were 32. Okay? Ilu amar chut, if there were said chut, that would be 1. Kaful, 2. Shazur, 4. Mashzar, l'shmona. Intertwine would make 8. Arba mikan, 4 of those. Hat Tlatinu Trin. That would give me 30, whatever, 32. Another Braita. Tana, it was taught. Arba'im Rishmona, 48. Ilu Hamarchut, 1. Okay, Kaful, 2. Kli'ah would be another braided, 3. Shazur, intertwined, 6. Mashzar, truly interwoven, L'shnei Masar, that would give me 12. Arba'am Mikan, 4 of those. Arba'im Mutmana, that gives me 48. Katuv Echad, okay. Omer Ma'asero came, a different presentation on the Parochet. One pasuk says its design was Ma'asero came, based on the embroiderer. Sorry. Katuv Echad Omer Ma'aseh Choshev, and the other said it was the work of the designer. Ma'aseh Choshev, work of the designer. Ma'asero came. Okay, so that's the difference. If it was one Ma'asero came, Partsuf Echad, it had one face. Ma'aseh Choshev, work of the designer. Shnei Partsufim, 2 faces. Rabbi Yehuda v'Rebbi Nehemiah present as follows. Chad amar ma'aseh came. One said it was the work of the embroiderer, Arei Mikan v'Ari Mikan, a lion here and a lion there. Ma'aseh Choshev, if it was the work of the designer, Ari Mikan v'Chalak Mikan, a lion on one side and it was smooth on the other side. B'Chaina Amar, and the other one said, Ma'aseh came, that if it was the work of the embroiderer, Ari Mikan v'Chalak Mikan, a lion on one side and smooth on the other side. Ma'aseh Choshev, if it was the work of a designer, Ari Mikan v'Gesher Mikan, a lion on one side and an eagle on the other side. B'Shmonim Ushtayim Ribo, when we said it was worth or using gold of 82 10,000s, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Bizna, B'Shem Shmuel, he said Guzma. That's a bit of an exaggeration. Man Tanina, and there we also teach Pamim Haya Aleh Keshlosh Me'ot Kur. Okay, if we're talking here about the ash that's on the Mizbeach, one time it was said that there was so much ash that it was 300 kur. Rabbi Yossi Bar Rabbi Ben B'Shem Shmuel again said Guzma. That's also an exaggeration. And we'll stop right there, and that's where we'll pick up tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.